Hi everyone, I think we should get started. Hopefully more people will join us as we go on. But I just want to start by welcoming everybody to the second SmartLine webinar, and thanking Tam for agreeing to give the webinar. So today, Tam is one of the SmartLine Research Fellows. She's based in mathematics and she's been working on SmartLine for probably over 3 years now. Today she's going to speak about COVID-19 and how it may or may not have impacted the indoor environment and our energy usage. So you'll have been asked to fill out a poll to give your thoughts on how COVID may or may not have impacted on electricity usage and outdoor environment. So we encourage you to choose one of the options. Tam is going to speak for about 40 or 45 minutes, and that gives us about half an hour for questions. In the meantime, during the actual webinar, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll try and get to them or save them until the end, where we'll turn everybody's mic back on and we can have a Q&A. So one last housekeeping thing to say is that this is going to be recorded. Hope that's okay with you. And it makes it accessible for everybody that would like to have attended and weren't able to. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Tam. Thanks, Tam.
Thank you, Karen. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As Karen said, my name's Tam. I'm a research fellow on the SmartLine project, and I'm going to talk about some work conducted in conjunction with Zening, Waken, Tim, Cheryl, Yang Yang, Lewis, Karen and Marcus, all part of the SmartLine project. On the SmartLine project, we primarily study health and well-being and technology across 300 homes in Cornwall. So first of all, I'm going to give some background information on SmartLine, including information about the survey and sensor data that we have. And then I'll talk about the changes during the COVID-19 lockdown in the indoor environment and energy and water usage. Sorry. SmartLine is the first project of its kind, looking at many different kinds of data to help us understand how health and well-being might be improved and to support local enterprises in developing relevant products. It's mainly funded by the EU Regional Development Fund and has had funding since March 2017. And we also have funding from the South West Academic Health Science Network, the UK government and Cornwall Council. So the University of Exeter is working with several partners. We have Coastline Housing, which is a housing association managing thousands of homes across Cornwall, including the 300 homes that are participating in the SmartLine project. And they're interested in understanding their customers' needs. For our second partner, Cornwall Council, the project helps inform housing related issues such as indoor air quality, which we're going to be looking at today. Volunteer Cornwall is our third partner. They're addressing the needs in the community. They've set up community-based projects in response to the feedback from SmartLine participants, such as green space projects, low impact exercise classes, and IT training groups. And the South West Academic Health Science Network is an important partner for us in helping to spread our findings across relevant bodies so that the impact can be maximised. So it's a huge and varied project and has been running since 2017 and is continuing until 2022. There are three key pillars to SmartLine: engaging with enterprises, working with and supporting the community, and producing international research. We have geographers, social scientists, data scientists, health researchers, economists, mathematicians, and there are probably others that I've missed, all conducting research on the data collected. So the project investigates a really broad spectrum of research questions, and it also provides a completely unique and novel data set, the largest of its kind that we're aware of, which supports our research on health and on housing. One of the main purposes of Smartline is to support small to medium enterprises in Cornwall, supporting them with research or with funding to help them evaluate market needs, for example, or assess their products, particularly the development of e-health and e-wellbeing products and services. And the overall aim from the EU funding is to boost the economy in Cornwall. This map shows some of the local enterprises that Smartline has supported so far via our knowledge exchange officers, Emma and James. The Smartline project has data sets from more than 300 participants from social housing across Camborne, Pool, Ullugan and Redruth, who've answered our surveys and also had sensors installed in their homes. In the face-to-face survey conducted in 2018, the majority of our participants reported as being white, with 69% being female. They have an average age of 56. 54% live in the 10% most deprived postcodes in England. 20% of participants didn't have an internet connection when we started the project. 59% reported as being retired or long-term sick or disabled, and 17% were in full-time employment. And the average time reported to be normally spent inside the home per day was 19.5 hours across the participants. In addition to those survey data, we also have sensor data. We've measured from sensors which were installed in 2017, 2018, and they record data every 3 to 30 minutes. In each home, we've recorded air temperature, humidity, and air quality, including particulate matter of size 2.5 micrometers, called PM2.5, which is about 1/30th the diameter of a hair. We also have external sensors placed outside the homes, again measuring temperature, humidity and air quality, and this time also including PM10. And we have measures of electricity usage, and in a selected subset of homes we have gas and water usage. We have more than 500 million data points altogether from the sensor so far, with each home having around 300,000 data points for temperature alone. So that gives an overview and introduction to the Smartline project. Generally, we're now going to have a look at the sensor data during the COVID UK lockdown, COVID-19. So we examined 2 periods, the week leading up to lockdown, 17th of March to 23rd of March, and the first month of lockdown itself, 24th of March onwards. And the difference between these two is that the advice from the government to stay at home on the evening of 16th of March being just advice versus a request or an instruction to stay at home on the evening of the 23rd of March. So as well as looking for an effective lockdown, we also wanted to test whether there was any impact of the advice to stay at home in the transition to the full lockdown. It could be that people act on that advice before the full lockdown as strongly as they do the full lockdown instruction itself. And if that were the case, that could be useful information for government's future strategies when they're advising or instructing people. So we want to know whether the sensor data have changed as a result of lockdown. And so we're going to be comparing the data in those 2 periods in 2020 with the same periods in 2019. So first, to look at our hypotheses about what we thought we might find in the indoor environment data. Due to the COVID-19 lockdown, people should be spending more time at home, and air quality can decrease with the time spent at home due to increased disturbance in particulate matter. And more time at home also allows for more cooking, more cleaning, and those both increase the concentration of airborne particles. So during the COVID-19 outbreak, we might also expect more cleaning and less opening of windows because of the threat of the virus spread, both of which those actions would both affect the indoor air quality. And we may also expect that the temperature in homes increases during the lockdown compared with the same time in 2019, with people heating their homes more at times when previously they would have been out of the house. The primary period of interest was the full lockdown, given the necessity to stay at home during that time, which should therefore have a larger effect on the indoor environment. But we may have some effects in the week leading up to the full lockdown following the government advice. But overall, we would expect the effects to be stronger in the lockdown than that pre-lockdown period. And so just to reiterate, what we're doing is going to compare the air quality data during 2020 with the same period in 2019. So that's our first main hypothesis. And then we have two more predictions. So regardless of behavioural responses to COVID-19 guidance, we'd expect air quality at different times of day to change as people go about their daily routines, just under normal circumstances, regardless of the lockdown. So we may expect to see differences between the years, between 2020 and 2019, at some times of day, but not other times of day. For example, there might be a difference between years in the middle of the day when people would usually be out in 2019, but were at home during the lockdown. And we might not see differences in the nighttime and the evening when people would usually be at home in both years. And we may also see shifts in the daily pattern from the data as people change their daily routine with staying at home more during lockdown. So we may see shifts in the sensor data from 2019 to 2020. Previous research has shown other factors that can affect indoor air quality. So we included those factors in our analyses. Household size can affect air quality, with more people providing more dust disturbance. Vacuum cleaning can temporarily increase the particles in the air. And from the survey responses, we had an estimate of how many times a month the participant vacuum cleans their home. Smoking and vaping increases particulate matter in the air, and we included whether or not the person smoked inside the home and vaped inside the home. Ventilation, so just simply opening windows, can affect air quality inside air quality relative to outside air quality. And we used the survey response about whether or not the participant regularly opened their windows in the living room as a measure of ventilation. Finally, we're expecting changes between 2019 and 2020 because people are staying at home more during the lockdown. But there might be people who stay at home anyway. For example, on average, as we've heard, Smartline participants spend 19.5 hours a day at home under normal circumstances. So we wanted to account for how much someone normally spends at home. And we included two measures. The first was simply the survey response about how many hours per day the participant and their partner spent inside the home. And the second was whether the person was employed or not, as opposed to, for example, looking after home and family or being retired. So homes were excluded from the analyses if the survey responses were missing, if the data indicated a sensor or data transmission malfunction, or the participant is no longer with the project. For PM2.5, there were 86 complete data sets, and for temperature, there were over 160 complete data sets. So here we've got a graph of the PM2.5 levels in the living room from February through to April, with 2019 in blue and 2020 in orange. And there's some indication on this plot that the from mid-March onwards, the 2020 has slight higher levels of PM2.5 than in 2019. We wanted to look at the PM2.5 levels across different times of day. So for each home, we took the mean average for each hour of the day across all the days in the period to give a profile throughout the day. And this graph shows the average across all homes in the week before lockdown, so from the 16th to 23rd of March. And we can see that there is an increase in PM2.5 in the middle of the day in 2020. So to find out whether those differences are statistically different, we use an analysis called a multiple regression, which allows us to include all of the factors that we think might affect PM2.5 and use those factors to try to predict the PM2.5 levels that we've measured. It tells us, the output tells us which factors are successful in predicting the PM2.5, in other words, which factors are associated with changes in PM2.5 levels. So we have a list of the factors included in the first column of this table. First, I'll explain this table before I get into the findings. So our first hypothesis was that PM2.5 might increase during lockdown in 2020 compared with the same time in 2019. So we're looking for the year factor in this first row to be associated with changes in PM2.5. We also thought that regardless of lockdown, there would be changes across the day in levels of PM2.5. So including the factor hour allows us to see whether there is a relationship between the hour of the day and the PM2.5 levels. And finally, we thought that the differences between the years might change with the different times of day. So to capture that information, we included the interaction of year by hour in the last row here, and it allows the regression model to change the effective year across different hours of the day and tells us whether there are any differences between those. So in the rest of the table, in the second column, we've got an estimate from the regression model as to how much each factor contributes to a 1-unit rise in PM2.5. In the third column, we've got a measure of how large that contribution is, or how large the difference is. And then in the last column, we have the p-value, which provides a measure of the strength of the evidence that the factor is actually associated with a change in PM2.5. If the p-value is small, if it's lower than 0.05, then we can say that there is evidence for a true difference, a true association of that factor with changes in PM2.5. So what do these results in the table tell us? Well, firstly, we're interested in the relationship with year. Did PM2.5 levels change from 2019 to 2020? But the output shows us that there is no relationship with year. PM2.5 levels didn't change between the 2 years. As we might have expected in the second row, there is a relationship with hour, with PM2.5 changing across different times of day. Some factors had no relationships with PM2.5 levels, so household size, time indoors, employment, vacuuming, whether or not somebody opens the windows in the living room, and vaping inside the home all did not correspond to variation into PM2.5 levels. But with smoking did, with PM 2.5 being much higher for those who smoke inside than for those who don't. And finally, we also see an interaction between year and hour of the day. So the difference between years changes with different hours of the day. So if I just skip back to the graph, the analysis showed us that the increase between 2019 and 2020 was greater at 1 p.m, 1300 and 2 p.m. Than for other points on the graph. So there is an increase in PM 2.5 in the middle of the day. So those were the results for the week leading up to lockdown. And here we've got PM 2.5 daily profile for the first month of the actual lockdown. And again, we can see there's an increase, a visible increase in the middle of the day. However, the regression model didn't show any change in PM 2.5 between 2019 and 2020, so the year in the top row there. As before, we see changes in PM 2.5 across different hours of the day and in smoking versus not smoking. And there was no interaction with between year and hour, so there was no differences across the years at different times of the day. So, however, the indoor air quality is affected by the external air quality. So it's interesting to look at the outside air quality when considering these results from the indoor air quality. So to go to our poll about sorry, just finding the window, to go to our poll about external air quality. We asked, how do you think the lockdown affected outside air quality in Cornwall? And 83% of you said it improved, no one said it worsened, and 17% said that it stayed the same. So I can say that you are correct during the actual lockdown period. But first of all, we're looking at the pre-lockdown period. And here we've got the PM 2.5 levels for the external sensors, so the outside air quality in the week leading up to the lockdown. And if anything, there's a increase in the PM 2.5, so air quality has worsened in 2020 compared with 2019. But during the actual lockdown, as most people responded in the poll, the air quality has improved in 2020 compared with 2019 in the middle of the day. So it could be that the lack of change in internal air quality between 2019 and 2020 could be because of a drop in the PM 2.5 outside. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at the temperature inside the home. In the week before lockdown, temperature was lower in 2020 than 2019. Overall, so that was in the bedroom, and then in the living room, the temperature, there was no difference between the temperatures overall, but the 2020 temperatures were lower at some points of the day. And those differences could be reflecting the external temperatures, with the external temperature being slightly colder in 2020 than in 2019. And again, those are the data from the pre-lockdown. If we look at the lockdown from the 24th of March onwards, there was no statistical difference. You can see there's a visual difference there, but not statistical difference in the bedroom temperature between 2019 and 2020. But in the living room, the temperature was higher in 2020. And the external temperature are also slightly higher in 2020. So the indoor temperatures will be affected by that, but there was no change in the bedroom, while the living room temperature did increase in lockdown, suggesting that people are heating their living rooms more during the lockdown than they did in the same period in 2019. So to summarise those findings for the indoor environment, in the week leading up to the full lockdown, there was an increase in PM 2.5 in the middle of the day, and there were lower temperatures indoors. And then during the first month of lockdown, there was no statistical difference in PM 2.5 inside, but this lack of difference could be due to lower PM 2.5 outside. And the temperature was higher in the living room in 2020 than 2019. So together, the results provide some evidence of people staying at home more during the lockdown. So now we're going to have a look at the energy, the electricity, gas usage and the water usage during the lockdown. To go to our poll, we asked, how do you think the lockdown affected electricity usage within our Smartline cohort? That should have been increased and decreased, apologies there. So I'm going to take it as improved is decreased, which 8% responded, worsened as increased is 58%, and stayed the same is about a third. So majority of people seem to think that it increased. And we will have a look at those data shortly. So our hypotheses here are that spending more time at home will cause an increase in energy usage. In addition, people may be washing and cleaning more than usual, so we'd expect an increase in water usage. And as before, we're primarily interested in the full lockdown, but we will also look at the week leading up to the lockdown when people were advised to stay at home, and increase hand washing as well. Again, we would expect larger differences during the full lockdown when people were actually instructed to stay at home. As for the indoor environment, regardless of the behavioural responses to the guidance, we would expect to see changes in utility usage across different hours of the day. So while we might not see an overall increase in energy and water usage, we might see differences between the 2 years at different times of day due to changes in occupancy at different times of day and due to changes in daily behaviour patterns. As for the air quality, we included other factors that can affect utility usage. So these are the number of people in the household, and for electricity, the presence of children or adolescents in the home, the size of the home in terms of the number of rooms, the type of building. For example, we used whether it's a flat or a house, the presence of a smart meter, which was asked about on the Smartline survey, although we didn't use smart meters for water and gas because all the answers were no from our participants. Fuel poverty and water poverty can also affect utility usage, and we created 2 measures to try to capture that aspect. One was a combination of the survey responses about whether the person thinks that their home is adequately heated or not, and whether or not they avoid heating and ventilation because of the cost of doing those activities. And then the second measure to try to capture fuel poverty was the average internal temperature of the home. For electricity, the presence of electrical appliances, of course, increases use. We use the number of pieces of technology that people reported on the survey, such as television, computer, mobile phone, and so on. And as before, we included 2 measures of the time normally spent at home, the hours per day, and whether or not the participant was employed. Sorry, I'm just reading some messages about people not being able to hear, but other people saying that it's okay. Let me just end the poll and see if that helps things. Can people still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tam.
Lovely, thanks, James. Okay. So as before, we excluded homes like we did for the indoor environment, and we had 50 homes for electricity, 8 for gas, and 14 for water. And here's a plot of the electricity hourly usage from February to April in 2019 in blue, and 2020 in orange. And we can see that the electricity usage decreases as we move from winter through into the spring. During the week before the full lockdown, we can see a distinct peak of increased usage in the evenings compared with the rest of the day, but there's not that much difference happening between the 2 years. And the analysis shows, reflects that with no relationship between the year and the amount of electricity used. And it didn't show a change for year in the last row, even when we looked at different hours of the day. So there's no interaction happening there. Electricity usage, however, did change across different hours of the day, reflecting the peaks that we just saw in the graph. And it increased with the number of people in the home, and it was higher for a house than it was in a flat. In the lockdown period, we can see that the evening peak is as before, but in 2020 in orange, there's a shift of the morning electricity usage towards midday and an increase at that time. And the regression models shows no overall difference between the years, but there is a significant interaction in the bottom row, showing that the difference between years changes at different times of day. So going back to the graph, the analysis showed that the increase from 2019 to 2020 at midday and also at 9 PM at 2100 are larger than other times of day. While at 6 AM, the electricity usage is lower, the difference is lower compared with other times of day. So electricity usage increased in the middle of the day and the evening, but decreased first thing in the morning. So just going back to the regression output, as we saw in pre-lockdown, we also get differences across the different hours of the day, as we would expect, and the household size increases electricity usage, and again, it's greater in a house than it is in a flat with the property type. So we also have the gas usage from February to April. And as with electricity, we can see that the gas usage decreases as we move from winter to spring. And there's also some indication of increased usage in March 2020 compared with 2019, but the pattern switches in April. So looking at the 24-hour profile in the week before lockdown, there is increased gas usage with a shift or widening of the morning peak of usage, and there's more usage in the mid-afternoon to evening. And this increase indicates perhaps extra heating or use of more hot water in the home. So due to the low numbers of the gas data sets, we had 8 complete sets. We only use measures that are repeated across the homes, the year and the hour. So we've got measures from all the homes in 2019 and 2020, and then we've repeated that measure also across the hour of the day. So we only included those in the analysis, and it shows for this pre-lockdown period an overall increase of gas from 2019 to 2020. And it shows that the usage changes with different times of the day, as we would expect. In the lockdown period, gas usage is lower than the pre-lockdown. So here we're at kind of a maximum-ish of 0.1, whereas in the pre-lockdown, the maximums were going up to almost 0.2 in the peaks. So that would indicate less gas usage as the weather is getting warmer from winter to spring. And in this lockdown period, there's little difference between the years. And the analysis reflects that there's no change across the year. There's no interaction between the year and the hour of the day. And here, gas usage no longer changes with hour of the day, which we would expect if people are using their gas and heating less. So just going back to the external temperature that we looked at earlier, in the week before lockdown, it was colder in 2020. So perhaps that increase in gas usage in the week before lockdown was contributed to by the colder outside temperatures, while in the lockdown period, it was actually warmer on average in 2020. So our final utility is water. And here's the 24-hour profile of water usage in the week before lockdown. We have peaks in the morning and in the evening. And the analysis shows that there's a relationship between water usage and the time of day, reflecting those peaks. And the water usage increases with the number of people in the home, but there's no relationship with year and no interaction. So no changes of year across different hours of the day. In the lockdown period, however, we can see that those peaks have increased in 2020 relative to 2019, and the morning peak has become 1 hour later in the day. It's become at 10 AM rather than 9 AM from 2019. And the analysis reflects those changes. We've got an overall change in water usage from 2019 to 2020. We've got a change with hours in the day, as we would expect, and as we had before, increased usage with increased numbers of people in the home. And we didn't get the interaction wasn't statistically significant, but we did wish to check anyway for changes in usage across the time of day, particularly given this apparent shift from 9 AM to 10 AM of peak water usage. And the analysis showed us that that change was greater at 10 AM than at other times of day. And there was some evidence that it was also greater at 6 PM as well. So these results are consistent with people washing their hands more, being at home more, so using more water at home, and perhaps taking longer or later showers, or having a bath instead of a shower, and having a more leisurely schedule rather than having to get to the school run or the morning commute. So in summary of the utilities data, during the lockdown in 2020, gas, electricity and water usage patterns showed some changes compared with the same periods in 2019. And those changes occurred even in this Smartline cohort, who we know spend a lot of time indoors anyway, and also that the cohort has a high proportion of retired and long-term sick or disabled people who would be more home-based. Pre-lockdown, there was an increase in gas usage. During the lockdown, there was increased water usage overall, and the morning electricity and water usage patterns shifted to later in the day. And so these changes are consistent with people getting up later, spending more time at home, and washing more. So the findings provide evidence of behavioural change in response to the UK government's guidance. So more generally, these results could inform future approaches to lockdowns and other times when more time is spent indoors. There's evidence of behavioural change during the lockdown, but generally there were no relationships or weaker relationships in the pre-lockdown than the lockdown, which suggests that the enforcement or a stronger message is required to obtain the behaviour change rather than simply advising. The findings can also be useful in understanding the wider societal impacts of COVID-19 lockdown and the unintended consequences, in addition to the obvious direct health consequences of COVID-19. And that's particularly important given that the virus is predicted to remain an active threat in the short to medium term. A decrease in air quality can have a direct impact on health, including respiratory disorders and asthma. Air quality in Cornwall is very good anyway, so there may be less of an effect in this area, but the findings could be useful in areas that do have poorer air quality in terms of the advice as to how to improve air quality when spending extended periods of time at home. Increased utility usage will have a direct impact on household bills, as has also been echoed in other research who've been looking at energy usage during the lockdown. And this impact can affect the ability to pay those bills and affect well-being more generally. Changes in gas, electricity and water usage during these periods may also be informative for supply networks. For example, understanding how demand in electricity can be influenced by responses to COVID-19, by consequent lockdowns, and by a general shift or trend now to work at home more. So thank you very much for listening, everyone, and thank you to our partners and funders. And now I believe the plan is that we will unmute people so that people can ask questions, or if you prefer, you can put questions in the chat box. I'm just skimming through now and can't see any questions there.
Maybe if we could turn the videos back on as well, if you wanted to see us.
Yep.
Thanks, Tam. That was really, really great. Some really interesting stuff coming from there.
Thank you.
So Zoe has a question.
So the overall picture, does it mean there was a significant change during lockdown or not? So there was for water usage. There was some evidence of gas increasing before the lockdown in the kind of week where the advice was given. And with the electricity, we saw that shift in the daily pattern. So the water and electricity usage shifted to later in the day. So in terms of communicating to policymakers, I think we need to engage with the Southwest Academic Health Science Network for their input on how to best communicate that. We can also write summaries that we can put on the Smartline website and kind of make those publicly available as well. So the next question, thank you, Zoe, from Adana. Please can you share the links to your research so that I can cite it? Thank you very much. We're in the process of preparing it for publication at the moment. I believe that we have your email address from the Eventbrite sign up, so I will make a note of that and get in touch with you as soon as we've got something we can share. Yeah, we have email addresses. That's excellent. Thank you.
And we've also recorded it, so if people are interested in gaining access to the recording, please let us know.
Hi, Tam. I've got a question.
Oh, hello, James.
Thank you for that. That was a great presentation. The question is, do we know if people are using smart thermostats to regulate their heating or not?
They do have thermostats for their heating, as far as I'm aware, but I don't know. I only know that from conducting the surveys. I don't know that from whether we've got those data for all the homes. But Coastline may have that information.
Just wondering if those with smart thermostats, it's easier to regulate your heat or turn your heat up or down, and whether that encourages people to do so.
Yeah, it may well do, or kind of giving that blast of heating in cold periods that might not be so efficient as kind of having a stable base of heating or a thermostat controlled heating. Yeah, that's something we could look into.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I do think it's interesting, Tam, that the one utility that is really decoupled from the weather, which is water, was the one that we saw some significance in. And do you think there's the possibility of building in climate weather into the model to control for that?
Yeah, I would like to do that. Certainly with the PM 2.5 and the temperature, we can look at the relative differences compared with the inside compared with the outside, and then have a stronger, kind of more robust conclusion about that change in the increase in temperature in the living room during the lockdown. And it would be nice also to look at the increase in temperature with the gas usage as well, and see if we can factor that in. With the more data that we're collecting over this coming winter, that will help us also understand not so much about lockdowns, but understanding the gas usage for a given rise in temperature.
Okay, great. So, any other questions? Well, if not, maybe we can start to wrap this up. Zoe is saying that, just to remind everybody that the recording will be available on the website. And the last thing to say is, as always, thank you very much, Tam.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks everyone.
And for anybody that's interested, Tam is actively, well, we all are actively writing this up. So hopefully we'll have it published sometime soon, because I think the findings are really, really interesting, particularly around water.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.